Hello, this is Stephen Trevathan with Arclight Interactive, bringing you another law firm marketing video. So I have a quick question. Does your firm have a documented process for requesting Google reviews? If the answer to that question is no, and you want to consistently generate more Google reviews for your firm in 2025, then you're going to want to watch the rest of this video. So a quick little bit about me, if this is the first of our videos that you've checked out. I was the Chief Marketing Officer for a firm, and in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the process I developed at that firm over about a 3-year period. And it results in about 239% increase in our Google reviews. So stick around. I'm going to share what that process was, how we set it up, how I refined it, and some really interesting insights I gained along the way. All right, let's get to it. Now you might be wondering, do I really need a process for requesting Google reviews? I mean, when the case comes to a close, we get a nice favorable outcome for our client, send a link to a Google review. Easy, right? Well, the reality is, and as a lawyer, you know this, especially when you're running your own firm, whether you're a solo practitioner or you have a team, just unexpected things happen, and it's really, really hard to stay consistent when you don't have a documented process. It really doesn't matter what you're trying to do. Having a process, having it documented, and measuring the results of that process is the key to staying consistent and improving. So when it comes to something like literally even sending a Google review request, it's just having a documented way of doing it and following that process to a T. It makes a huge difference. Also, if you're watching this, then I'm going to assume that you have a fair understanding of how valuable Google reviews are from an SEO perspective. They're just one of the most powerful tools available to any business owner, just as a point of sales tool. I mean, it's just something that's working for you 24/7. It's one of the key factors in terms of determining your placement in the local pack in Google organic search results. And local pack being just, if someone searches for something like personal injury attorney near me or personal injury attorney in my geographic area, wherever that might be, that initial result that you would see where it's that box and it shows the map snippet and typically 3 like Google business profiles based off of the search. That ranking of who shows up there is based off of a geographic proximity to the searcher's IP address, as well as other factors like Google reviews. So for instance, a firm that has more Google reviews and is maybe a little bit further away probably will get preferential treatment in terms of placement over a firm that might be closer to that searcher but has fewer or no Google reviews. I mean, it's an important trust factor. It's something that Google's looking for, and they reward those businesses that are playing into the system. That's the game that we're playing here when it comes to online marketing. So additionally, if you're able to run Google local services ads for your practice area, those Google reviews play a huge role in your ranking placement for Google local services ads as well. Okay, so before I get into the meat of this video, I really just wanted to quickly clarify what I mean by documented process, just in case. And what that is just a business or operational procedure where every single step and decision point and relevant detail is clearly outlined and recorded in a written document. So essentially, the importance of that is once you have that documented and you have staff members, they are able to more easily follow that process to the T in order to get the desired outcome that you want as a business owner. So, I mean, these are for basically all important business procedures. You want to have a documented process because it allows you to not only ensure better consistency amongst your staff members, but if you're running into challenges having a documented process in place makes it easier for you to identify those friction points or those issues and address those and optimize your business system, back-end system, your infrastructure. So when it came to building the process initially at the firm, I wanted it to address 3 core areas. I saw 3 core problem areas that, without a documented process in place, this is where things kind of would fall apart in terms of just not being, consistent. One being just when was the optimal time to make a request. 2, how to make this request in a way that would work well for attorneys and clients. And 3, what were some tools that we could invest in that would, help us stay more consistent, help it be simpler for attorneys to send the link, help it be simpler for the clients that got it to get directly taken to the Google review form. And also allow us to leverage some automation in terms of follow-ups and reminders after we sent that initial review request. All right, so what was the optimal time? Well, when we first launched this process, we wanted our attorneys to ask if their client would be willing to leave a Google review following the delivery of a positive outcome when it came to their case. So this would be towards the end of the client-attorney relationship, but before they'd receive that final settlement check, right? So we still wanted kind of to play off that foot in the door, aspect of, they were still waiting for something from us. So more likely for them to actually take that extra step. Because as optimized as we got this process, there's still an element on them to actually follow through and write the review. And that is this reality. So we identified that as a good time, and we wanted to focus on that and build the process around just being able to consistently make that ask at that point. Next, I wanted the process to simplify the ask. Right, so we've established the time that we want our attorneys to ask for a review, and I want to make it as simple as possible for them to ask. We actually did have attorneys that were a little adverse to the prospect of asking for a review, and it was one of those surprising challenges that I faced in really rolling this out to the team. And so one way that I just found to make it easier was I literally created pre-written templates. So I created scripts, I created templates that could be used, sent via email or text. A lot of those ended up also being used in our automation software that we added to this entire process. But just literally having that things written out so that it was just there. I didn't want there to be additional thinking involved in terms of, all right, how do I say this in a way? I mean, it's just we created templates. We worked with our attorneys to refine those, make sure that it felt natural for them, and we even added that to our the final letters just with a QR code too, but just we made sure that the process itself documented that we had these templates and how to use these templates and where new attorneys go to find those templates. So as part of the onboarding process, when they walk through how this process works, the documentation included just all details about those templates that were all built around just making it as simple as possible. In addition to that, I also created 5 simple questions that you could use and send to a client that was potentially just not sure what to say in the review. So just kind of like real simple questions like, What made you pick our firm over other law firms for your case? Something that was just simple for them to answer and would serve as a really good review. Honestly, from another like little SEO element or recommendation, you can develop those. You can take some extra time in developing those specific questions based off of if you want more of your reviews to reference certain practice areas or certain aspects of how your business is run. You can actually create questions that are based on are more likely to generate an answer that includes those types of phrases or terms, which can actually have an additional impact on your local SEO. So something to think about there. All right. So as a final part of developing our process for Google reviews, I identified a software tool that I wanted to use in order to automate certain elements of the request process. And the tool I found and ended up using the entire time I was at the firm is this tool called GatherUp. This isn't a paid promotion for GatherUp or anything like that. It's just the one that I ended up using. There are other solutions out there, but GatherUp allowed me to integrate our Google business profile, our Facebook, Avo, essentially, I believe any platform where you can receive reviews, it will integrate with that. And additionally, it was really easy for me to set up the entire team with logins for the platform. So I created a training video that was easily accessible, again, documented the process that walked. I built it for the attorneys first. The whole process was designed for our attorneys first, but it made it very easy for really anybody to be able to enter a client. I think in the system itself it's labeled as customers, but enter a client, their name, their phone number, and their email, and the system allows you to send the review request via text message or email. So another specific part of our process was that we wanted the attorney to ask the client if they were willing to leave us a Google review, what their preferred method of communication was, whether it was via text message or via email. And that was important because, again, I've said this a few times, but we are trying to address friction points with this process. If you don't take that seriously, you can end up annoying someone that was actually willing to give you a Google review, especially if you're going to be adding. That's kind of the thing. If you're adding automation to the back end of this process, you really need to be careful. You really want to make sure that you're taking into consideration what people's preferences are, because people can get annoyed by extra notifications. They're getting texts and email follow-ups. They might end up getting annoyed, and worst case scenario, they might end up leaving a bad review even after you've done a really, really amazing thing for them. You've helped them out. Unfortunately, the sad reality is a negative experience is much more motivating for someone to leave a Google review than a positive one. And I bring this up because I know from speaking to other law firm owners that, and just other business owners in general, just there is that concern when it comes to negative Google reviews, and then for some reason that's looked at as a reason to not push for Google reviews in general, when first and foremost I have to say that it should be one of the key reasons that you have a process in place to be generating positive reviews on a regular basis, because the fact of the matter is getting a bad review is just kind of part of the game. It's going to happen. It's just people it's part of running a business, right? Even if you run a tight ship, sometimes things happen, and balls can be dropped. It's just part of running a business, and you're gonna get negative reviews. It'll happen. Hopefully, you're not getting a lot. If you are, that's also an opportunity to be identifying. If there's some consistency around what's creating that, there's a whole other thing, but you're gonna get a negative Google review, and you have a great opportunity then to specifically address that, which I always recommend. I don't want to go too far into all that. I don't want to take away from just kind of the heart of what this video is, but I do have to mention that because it's just something that it comes up. I actually remember giving a presentation to, I think it was mental health therapists that were starting their own practices, and talking about the importance of Google reviews, and in the Q&A portion following my presentation, that was one of the main things people were asking about, was just that it just was this concern around handling negative Google reviews. And so my advice still remains the same. That was back in 2019, and I mean, it remains the same now. It's something that will likely happen. It's just part of doing business. We have our off days. Something can and probably will go wrong, but it just gives you an opportunity to address it politely, apologize, and I'm saying address as and actually giving a response to the review so other people can see it. And in fact, crazy enough, polite and concise responses to negative reviews from business owners, where they're not trying to put down the person or not trying to say that the person was wrong. That person had a bad experience. You can't say that person didn't have a bad experience. That's not going to work. In fact, if you see business owners that go in and write responses to bad reviews like that, it just comes off as petty. It does not look good. I've had a lot of people that have actively just basically crossed a business off their list of potential places they would ever want us to go to, spend money with, whatever, because of that type of a approach. But if you respond politely, apologize, and just make a promise to do better, maybe offer them some sort of opportunity. Again, as a law firm, if it's a client, I'll tell you this, in our experience at our firm, typically where if we would get a negative review, it was more later on as we were scaling up more, and it was typically due to a miscommunication with the intake department. Maybe we weren't able to get back to them as fast as they wanted. And if you're dealing with a high call volume, it's just one of those things. Or some people, and again, law firm owners, this, but people don't really, most people don't really have an understanding of the specific differences between certain practice areas, and so they're just calling. Sometimes they're just calling lawyers looking desperately for someone that'll take on their case, and if you're not able to help them. And it was again part of our intake department process. Another video I'll want to get into, that we would make sure to try to point them in a direction, try to provide some value in terms of either referring them to the Florida bar, or using our database of other attorneys with other practice areas that could potentially help. But we try to point them in the right direction if we weren't going to be able to help them ourselves. So going back to this, having this be defined as a kind of final portion in our process, attorneys were trained on when and how to add their clients to GatherUp, asking for that communication preference, how to set it up in GatherUp to be able to send this message that would have the link to Google, and then it was set up with a specific follow-up timeline, and based off of if we didn't get the review or not. Additionally, there's just nothing that really still beats. Automation and software tools are great, but there's still just nothing that beats that aspect of a more direct follow-up. So it was also stated in the kind of final portions, the after the initial ask portion of the process document, that our attorneys would also send a more personal email follow-up or text or even a call. If they had a follow-up, given our timeline, it was likely that they would have a follow-up call anyways with clients. So there was another time for them to just ask if there was an issue with leaving the Google review. And again, technology being technology, with some clients that were older, we would have to kind of troubleshoot that, and even potentially even trying to walk them through kind of how to leave a actual Google review, even if they got too late the Google review window. But that's just part of it. And again, when you have this whole process documented, it's easier to identify those problem points and do it more consistently. All right, so next I want to talk about some of the internal resistance that I encountered when proposing the process, establishing it, rolling out to the team, and what we did to overcome this internal resistance. And really, it's something that was interesting, and there was aspects that was surprising to me, namely that we had some attorneys that just were uncomfortable with the whole idea of asking for a Google review. And so I spent time talking with those attorneys, and really the issue that I discovered was they didn't understand. They knew that the partners and I had in a firm meeting said, hey, this stuff's important. It helps our online presence, all that stuff. But I think the missing link had really been educating them on how those reviews can really benefit them specifically. And so once I was able to really kind of clarify that, it helped. And then obviously as we developed our process and just the templates and establishing, getting GatherUp set up. When the first iteration of the process was really more of just kind of a general, at this point is when you ask, here's literally a script or a email template that you can send, and here's the actual link from Google in the script so you can send it. But we didn't have GatherUp was not a part of the first versions of our Google review process. And additionally, I actually really benefited from the insights I gained from spending time talking with the people that were most resistant to this process, because overcoming that resistance was how I think I made the biggest improvements in this, in where we landed. And I think we had gotten to essentially version 6 of our Google review request process. I'm saying that a lot, but it was, and every version was just based off of an actual significant update to the whole document. And so it was surprising for me at first, but I think some of that was my own bias, coming from my digital marketing background. It's just every Google review is so important, but really actually taking the time to clarify the individual benefit to attorneys that were resistant was big. We also, as we expanded our process, and especially with GatherUp in the mix, and where I could actually have it so that any team member had a login and could send a Google review request, we added additional incentives for staff that weren't attorneys, that they were, we could tie their name to Google reviews. They would get a gift card, stuff like that. There's a lot of things that you can do. And then additionally, something I wanted to mention in this portion of the video is just, all this becomes way simpler if you go through the process of actually establishing this type of a Google review request process early on. So if you're watching this and you're a solo practitioner, this is the time to really document all this stuff out. And then you have that as a part of your onboarding process when you hire a new attorney, paralegal, anybody that you're bringing onto your team. You have that fully documented. So when they're going through the onboarding, it's real clear and simple. If you go through and literally have every step, they really can't say that they didn't understand that as a part of their responsibility. And then you as a leader, as an owner of the business, it's a responsibility on your side. If you have an expectation for a member of your team to be doing something, but you don't really have that detailed, it's really on you at the end of the day if they're not actually following through and doing the thing that you want them to do. So again, that's just another real reason on why it's worthwhile to be going through it's not the fun thing, but literally going through the steps of documenting these things and what the expectation is and all the steps involved and all the resources you have and all these things. So that way it's, if you're seeing that people aren't following through on this, again, it's simpler to identify where the issues are. And my biggest updates to our process really did come from spending time with people that just weren't following through and talking to them about why. And those were really amazing insights that I think really made the process much better. All right, so to close out this video, I just want to quickly go over the real results that we had from establishing a process and then actually documenting all the elements of that process and continuing to work and improve that process, and taking feedback from members of the staff and being open to that feedback, hugely important. But when I first started at that firm in-house, there were about 57 reviews, and personal injury being one of their primary practice areas and how competitive of an area that they're in, they just were not able to compete with that many reviews. And with their Google local services ads, we weren't getting placement. And for a lot of organic search queries, we just weren't getting ideal placement in the Google local pack. So it was a big initiative for me to establish a way to more consistently generate reviews, right? So over the time that I was there, we were able to increase our Google reviews by 239%. Now, that's significant. It made a big difference for us in terms of the performance that we were able to get on Google services ads. I heard this actually quite a bit, especially once we had an intake department set up, being able to source, continual feedback from our intake specialists on elements that people were mentioning as a reason that they were hiring the firm over others. And especially, you're in a competitive practice area like personal injury. These are key details, but a lot of people would mention that the Google reviews that we had played a really key role in that final decision, especially, if they are not being referred. This is huge. And this is how you are winning more unattached cases. So 239% increase, was very happy with that. I will say that an area where we could have done even better was on the leadership side of things. During case reviews, it was something that I wanted the partners to be a little bit more consistent on, but having a line item in their agenda for case reviews with attorneys to ask them about did you send the Google review, and if not, why? And honestly, that was just an area where I didn't see consistency on their side. Unfortunately, that would have probably been, if I'd stayed longer at the firm, I think that would have probably been in the version 7 update of the process. And so I wanted to mention that here. We really did see an impressive increase in Google reviews, but there's still that element that I think could actually improve it even more that we didn't officially add to our process. So I wanted to say that here. Another big thing. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, the timing of the request was kind of a key aspect of the process, and something that I was interested in really kind of learning by establishing a process, because you establish it, as you see consistency, you can also start to be able to test certain aspects. And with us having everything established, and then once we had our intake department, had our intake specialists, and our intake specialists had access to GatherUp, I actually found that we had a lot of success in generating Google reviews way earlier in the client intake process. So, and in fact, even more surprising, we could often get Google reviews from people that had called in that we weren't able to take on their case. So if you're watching this and if you've done a lot of digital marketing, if you have a marketing agency running an ad campaign for you, what you've probably experienced is you're going to get a lot of I don't know, I'd say it's, I guess, unqualified leads, but just essentially people that be calling in, because they saw your law firm online, and most people don't understand the nuances between practice areas. They see law firm and they have a problem they want a lawyer for, and they will call. So I mean, this was a thing that we were frequently dealing with, and so as we were optimizing our intake department and process, this was something that was quite fascinating to me. But an opportunity that I saw was, because we trained our intake specialists well on that providing that value even to someone that we could not help. There was oftentimes they would mention, they would be on the call with that potential potential client or lead, the person that called in, and even though we couldn't help them, they were really happy with that interaction, and oftentimes would say something like, well, I wish there was something I could do to show that I'm that appreciative. And our intake specialists were specifically trained as that is a great opportunity to ask if they would be willing to leave us a Google review. And with everything processed out and them having direct access to GatherUp, they knew exactly how to easily enter that person's information into GatherUp, trigger a text message or email send while they have them on the phone, and would oftentimes get a Google review from that person, that even though we couldn't help. Actually, the conversion rate on that was particularly good, surprisingly good. And so really, it's something I really wanted to mention in this. I still think if you have everything established and you are also doing that aspect that a good leader should be doing, which is holding your team accountable and taking time. Again, the case review is a great opportunity to do this, but asking your attorneys, hey, are you actually following through when it comes to this established process, as it is your responsibility to do. So if you're doing that, then having that review request take place at the end when you're giving good news about an outcome to a client, still a good time to send that Google review request. But I just thought it was really interesting that with the right tools in place and the right system, with the right details and the right training, if you have even say if it's a receptionist that is at your firm is one that is actually taking those initial calls, this is something that could work with them too. But it's, whoever is taking that, even if it's someone that you can't help, if you're providing value there, there's still an opportunity to ask for a Google review request real early. Again, another element that I was kind of looking at potentially adding into the next iteration of our process was also having a time frame for asking for a Google review after a successful handoff from our intake department to the attorney paralegal team. So at our firm, we also had a specific attorney and paralegal pairing. So those were each one was essentially viewed as a team. And so that following a good intake interaction to a smooth transfer to the attorney and paralegal, the paralegal would be empowered to ask if they'd be willing to leave us a Google review at that moment. So again, earlier in the client attorney timeline, that was a big takeaway. That's if you have these systems in place, you have the template, you have the the ability to easily follow up using a platform like GatherUp. It's well worth it to just actually be willing to ask for that Google review even earlier in the process than you might think. And I think you'd be surprised by the conversion rate you get from doing that. So honestly, that's kind of how I want to finish this. It was really an interesting experience working through that process over 3 years. Some surprising takeaways, but really the thing is it's simple enough to do. Just taking the actual time to write it all down, and then once you do that, actually keeping yourselves accountable to following it, keeping your team accountable to following it, and being open to feedback. Whenever you establish some sort of a process, especially depending on the personalities that you have, you're kind of actually hoping to get some feedback. That's an opportunity to continue to improve. So, all right, I'm going to close this video. I think it's going to be long enough. But thank you for watching. Again, this is Stephen Trevathan with Arclight Interactive. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.